if you think back to how everybody was feeling in the middle of March and the beginning of April, there was just like this shock factor that caused everybody to take a step back because they just didn't know how anything was going to play out. And so over time, I think what we've seen is that the lenders got through that period. They got their arms around their portfolios and identified where their problems were. In the U.S., we did have some, very significant government programs that were enacted, and some borrowers have been able to take advantage of those. A lot of those were actually designed so that it was going to be difficult for private equity owned businesses to access funds that were made available through those government programs, but there are some that were able to do that. So, they kind of stabilized and settled down and got through that period. So I think in general, across the market in the U.S., the lenders feel like the problems are less than they initially thought that they would be. And so that's caused them to be more aggressive, again, for deals that have held up well.
We see that lenders look more around, the spending or any impact on the customer spending. Would they scale back? And are there any dependencies on the underlying industries? So not only the sector your lender is in, but their customers, their clients, what sectors could be impacted. And there's the expectation that GDP will decline, and that would then especially impact anything like retail-related discretionary spending and so on.
Lenders are being very selective in terms of the sectors they're lending to at the moment. And I think it won't be news that TMT, healthcare, services, they're the sectors most market participants are focusing on. And what that means in these sectors is there is a lot of competition amongst finance providers to lend to the best credits. As a consequence, any spike in pricing we've experienced in spring has come down fairly quickly to pre-COVID levels in the UK, and definitely a lot quicker than expectations. I've got a real-life deal example actually in the healthcare sector. And we got the first pricing indications over the summer with final commitments mid-October on that transaction. And we'll be closing with a 75 bips margin improvement, and that's with half a ton more leverage than originally discussed with lenders.
We saw that lenders took a quite pragmatic view and approach with regard to covenant defaults. There were a number of covenant holidays provided until Q3 or even Q4. So the companies can really focus on their business, get back on their feet, and then you can also analyze and judge the full impact based on the full year outcome. And then all of those kind of problems are then deferred into next year. And that, however, that only happened, you have to make a caveat here that liquidity was not an issue, or they could get an additional liquidity funding through government-backed loans.
The nature of the pandemic is like it's no one's fault, right? So I think the banks and the debt funds, it's very unlike a situation where the management team or the sponsor did something that, they made a bad investment, or they invested in a product line that didn't perform, or they undertook a CapEx project that, was a disaster or something like that. It was like, well, this happened and it wasn't anybody's fault. And so I think the lenders, both banks and non-banks, have initially gave the companies a bit of a pass, and if you didn't need liquidity, then you got a covenant holiday or some other amendment that gave you enough runway. But we do see in the fourth quarter, the first quarter, the second quarter of next year, I think it's that those types of transactions and that restructuring activity is going to pick up is our expectation.
Actually, there is another trend which may be more UK specific, and that's the increased interest in portability at the moment. We've definitely noticed that more and more of our clients are asking about how portability works. They're asking whether there is appetite from lenders in the mid-market to provide a portable financing package on a deal. And I think that reflects sponsors or private shareholders who may have envisaged selling this year. They haven't done it because of the pandemic, and I mean, they're in a situation where the sale may be delayed until next year, therefore after the end of the Brexit transition period. In reality, no one can really fully predict the impact of Brexit on the economy, and neither the impact of Brexit on the financing environment. So these borrowers, they are keen to de-risk the financing aspect of their exit. If they're planning a refinancing or a dividend recap before the sale, then it makes total sense for them to include portability further in their loan documentation and provide the future bidders with the ability to use the existing financing package if for any reason raising finance becomes more difficult at the time.